Welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and in this episode of Call Like I See It, we're going to take a look at the crime rate, which by the numbers seems to be falling in the U.S., and consider what this means in light of some other numbers that we see, which seem to indicate that the public is completely missing this. You know, the vast majority of Americans think that crime is increasing. So it's a pretty basic misalignment on what people think versus what's going on. And later on, we're going to discuss the idea and the practice of tipping, which seems to be actually becoming more widespread with like the use of technology and paying your bills using tablets and stuff like that. And we'll have a conversation that, or kind of touch on a thing that's been talked about for decades, really, or centuries, and that is whether tipping has gone too far. Joining me today is a man who knows how to find the answers when faced with the confusing or the mysterious. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, are you ready to put on your true detective hat today?
Yeah, Sherlock Holmes style.
All right. Now, we're recording this on January 16th, 2024. And based on recent numbers from the FBI, it seems like crime rates in the country are going down, in the United States are going down, which, unless you're in the crime business, would seem to be something to be happy about, or something could seem to be considered to be progress. But the only thing is that it seems like a substantial majority of Americans, and we're talking 70, 80%, are oblivious to this. They actually think it's the exact opposite, that the crime rate is going up and therefore are more concerned about crime, which kind of matters because, you know, in America, we kind of do this government of the people thing. And, you know, the people kind of having an idea of what's going on, it would be helpful if you're going to take part in selecting leadership and determining priorities and so forth. So to get us started, Tunde, just what's your reaction to seeing this disconnect, like just in the numbers, a straight disconnect between people's perception of what's happening with crime versus what's actually happening in reality?
Yeah, I find it on the surface, I find it very interesting and fascinating. But as I was preparing for the show today, you start looking at things and I realize how often we as people do this in general, where we have there's a kind of cognitive dissonance. There's a disconnect between, kind of maybe facts and the reality of data and information versus how we perceive things. Yeah, and I think, in just recent conversations we've had on the show, a few months ago, we did one on the economy, I think 3-4 months ago. We had a similar type of conversation that the economic data at the time appeared to be much better than the feeling that most Americans said they had, and even people we talked to in our regular life. And then I started just thinking about other things, and we could talk about our history. We could talk about how religion has been morphed over time. I was watching something recently that reminded me that Jesus is Asian. You think about the Middle East is actually part of the continent of Asia. We're American, and here I'm used to seeing Jesus images looking like a European, and that hit my brain sideways. I'm like, hold on, what do you mean he's Asian? Then I had to think about it. It's like, yeah, the guy's born in Bethlehem. It's the Middle East. It's the continent of Asia, so technically he's Asian. So, I think this again doesn't feel like it's true. We get inundated with messages and images on our media of how bad everything is and how bad crime is. But to your point, I'm looking at here that in 2023, violent crime dropped 8%, while property crime fell 6.3%. I'm like, okay, well, that seems positive. But you're right. If you ask the average person on the street right now, do you think crime is good or, is it better or worse? Most people probably say, oh, it's terrible and this is the worst we've ever had it. So,
yeah. Or at least that it's getting worse, and that I think the numbers are 80% of Americans, essentially are saying that they think that crime is worse. And we did observe the same thing economically. And one thing that's been observed kind of in the phenomenon of this is something that happens from time to time. It really goes more to people's just how they feel about what's going on in the country in general. And so if they feel good about what's going on in the country, even if things are bad, they'll feel like things are going good. So if people just had a good feeling about the country right now, then they would think the crime rate is good, the economy is good, and they would look at things with rose-colored glasses. But if they're just overall pessimistic in general, then if you ask them about different factors specifically, they'll be like, oh, that's bad, that's bad. Where it gets even crazier a lot of times is when you separate out and say, well, how is your economic outlook, or how have you been affected by crime more, lately than before? A lot of times people will say I'm okay, but I just think the larger is in bad shape, again, without respect for whether that's actually true. And I think part of this is just living in a big country. Like if we all lived in a small area, like, literally like the size of like a city of maybe a couple 100,000 people, then we probably would have a better feel for kind of the ebbs and flows of it. But when you're talking about 330 million people and spread out over such a long space, our perception is driven in some respects by what's going on around us. But I think even our brain corrects for that, because we recognize what we see is such a small portion of what's going on. And so we kind of just take a larger, whatever, again, however we kind of feel the way things are going, and we just impute that on everything. So we're not like people who, when they're asked these questions, I mean, and this kind of illustrates this point, they're not saying, oh, you're asking me, do I think crime is better or worse? Well, what are the numbers? Or let me go look and see what the numbers are. They're not doing that. They're just giving a gut reaction to how they feel about it. And that's going to be driven by, and we've talked about this before, in terms of media incentives to tell you things are bad just because media is in the attention game and news media is in the attention game. And if they tell you things are good, you're going to turn it off. They tell you, coming up next, the crime wave, then you're not going to turn the TV off. And so like there's that. And then just kind of, we see factors like social media where people don't post all of the times that, oh yeah, I ordered from Amazon and it came today, no problems. People don't post that. But if the one time it gets taken or something like that, people will post. And so you multiply that. So I think how our perceptions are formed a lot of times do focus on or are highlighted the negative things. But in general, like I said, I think that this makes a lot of sense, because we just wouldn't walk around with an understanding of what's happening across, this huge country all the time anyway.
Yeah. No, and it really speaks, unfortunately, I mean, this is a word I'm looking for, is probably not appropriate for this, but I'll say it. It like speaks to the importance of general propaganda. And that propaganda,
information in general, but
that's what I'm getting at is propaganda. I know has a negative kind of connotation, but the idea of propaganda, I guess, could be positive or negative. I mean, we propagandize ourselves in this country very well, and in my opinion, with the idea of the founding fathers, for example, and we revere, the way they designed the founding documents, the Bill of Rights, all these things. And in the end, when you dig into it, they were regular guys that were having affairs on the side of their wives and having kids out of wedlock. And it kind of, they were human beings, which one could find imperfection, but we propagandize what we consider as the positive part. And like I said, to me, that's a positive propaganda. Negative propaganda would be what we're kind of alluding to here, which is, this constant negativity. And I think, you hit it on the head already. And I saw some of the studies that alluded to this, which is really, it's our media ecosystem, because the formula that's been figured out is, to disturb people, you get clicks and people watch the channel. If people really wanted to be genuinely informed, C-SPAN and PBS would be the most popular channels. But they're the most least watched channels because they're boring. I mean, C-SPAN is an actual just feed into the Congress. So if you really wanted to see what's going on, unfettered and unfiltered, you would be tuning into that. But people would rather have their heroes and villains on the cable news networks and their social media apps. So the thing is that images are powerful. And if we go back to this crime thing, think about no matter what media ecosystem someone is involved with, there's an incentive to disturb us all. So if I'm someone who's more progressive, maybe more Democrat leaning, where I'm watching MSNBC and certain channels like that, they're focused more on things like school shootings, mass shootings, things like that. Those don't happen every day, but those are scary. And if I'm seeing it on the news, maybe every other week, that we have more mass shootings, I feel like, even though I've never seen a mass shooting and there hasn't been one in my neighborhood, blah, 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 it still feels like it's encroaching on me. And then on the flip side, if you're more conservative, Republican, and you're watching Fox or similar type of things, what are they showing? They're showing the people going into Walgreens in San Francisco or a smash and grab in New York, a gang of thieves that are organized. And again, that's scary. That makes you feel like, oh, these barbarians are all coming and smashing down the stores. And you could be sitting in Omaha, Nebraska watching that and getting out. So, and there's nothing going on in your town like that. So that's the sad part, is that we are all being driven into this negativity by watching similar things, and
Well,
whether
what you're saying, though, just real quick to build on that, because and this goes back to my point as far as the size of the country, and that if you only got local news, like there would be less negativity to choose from. But because you're talking national news, there's just endless negativity to choose from if we want to try to find messages. And so it increases, like if you only focus on what's happening around you, there's only so much good and only so much bad, but we can always find something crazy happening somewhere, no matter what kind of your proclivity are, what's going to disturb you. I can find something that's going to disturb you somewhere in the country almost every day. And so, and that's what ends up happening a lot of times. And just to your point, though, partisanship does, based on the numbers, we'll have this in the show notes, partisanship does, it does influence this. Republicans think it's worse than Democrats think it is, in the sense that, Democrats are in power, Republicans aren't. So, like that's there. But even amongst Democrats, like it's greater than 50% of Democrats are misperceived, and think that crime is worse now than crime is trending worse. So it's still a trend that holds, even if if partisanship may make it a little bit more extreme.
Well, the area that we discussed in a show probably a year or maybe even longer ago, which came to mind in preparing for this, was immigration. And we had discussed, I remember, a Pew Research study that the lowest actual border crossings in the last 50 years since like 1973 was in 2016.
Yeah.
And remember, I joked and said this country responded by hiring the next guy who said he was going to build a wall.
Yeah.
And that's because the propaganda
it became the most salient political issue, even though the numbers said it was actually the best it had ever been. Yeah.
And so that's why I think, again, that's because of quality negative propaganda from certain media outlets. And I think that's where, you mentioned this.
And also people's disconnect. If everybody lived on the border, then they could see whether or not there was a lot of people going, or they'd have they were closer to it. But if people are 500, 1,000 miles away, it's just like, all right, whatever I see on TV, that must be what it is.
Well, the thing also to me is because you said it at the beginning of this discussion pretty well, which is, the kind of the negative messaging really from the media and perspective. Because again, with my brain going there, I started looking up some immigration stats just out of curiosity. And so I found that this is the most recent stats. The number of immigrants turned away or apprehended at borders reached 2.8 million in fiscal year 2022. That's high. That's what everybody's been, concerned about, right? Mm-hmm. The highest number since at least 1980. Again, perspective. That actually made me like, oh, okay. So this isn't the first time the country's seen it.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, I was 2 years old, but I guess immigration was an issue back then too in 1980. So meaning,
and we survived.
Yeah, exactly. We survived. That's really my point about the perspective. That's why I bring it up, and thank you for saying that, because again, with perspective, we would understand this may not be a hair on fire moment. Maybe if we actually, because again, people have to relearn how the country works and the system. I had to remind one of my friends having this conversation last week that the Congress makes the laws in the United States. And that's basically what I told him is the Congress has the ability to make immigration laws or adjust them or change them, but they're not doing their job. And we keep electing people going to Congress who decide that being on TV and fundraising is more of where they should spend their time than actually getting in a room and figuring out their differences and legislating on behalf of the American people. And so, and right now we have a Congress that's acknowledged that they're not going to work on the border because it's an election year, and they're more concerned about partisan politics.
They'd rather campaign on it than
help
which is actually interesting that they've said that out loud.
They said that publicly, so it's no longer a secret. And so I think that's it. Like I started looking at this, and it's just a reminder. Because we don't discuss anything with a lens of perspective, therefore, every time we hear something, it's like the most diabolical. Oh my God, the world's going to end. And it's like, well, this happened before. I even had a friend I had breakfast with last week, and he was, not happy with the withdrawal of Afghanistan, and which, I understand and I respect that. And he was talking about how we left all of our weapons and stuff behind, and the jets and all that. And I didn't want to challenge him in the breakfast, but in my head, I'm thinking, Well, I remember learning that we did the same thing in 1979 after the Islamic Revolution in Iran. We had F-14s and all that we sold to the Shah, and we pulled out of there in 1980 and left a bunch of weapons there, and that's life. Like, this has happened before, but people don't talk about these things in perspective.
That goes to your point, though, as far as, just kind of our consumption habits. And this is, this goes back to that quote, the Roger Ailes quote, that people want to feel informed more so than be informed. And that perspective doesn't keep eyeballs, giving people perspective by and large. I mean, in on broad strokes, the information ecosystems, the news media has learned that this stuff is trial and error. It's diabolical to the extent you want to see it as diabolical, but it also boils down to profit motive very simply as well. And now the question of whether or not we should have profit motive determining what information we get and how information is presented to us is a whole other question. But you can explain the current situation based on profit motive more than anything else. And so when you look at this, and we've brought up some similar examples, like you said, we spoke about the economy as well a couple months ago on this, and the same disconnect that people think the economy is in really bad shape, whereas the numbers keep saying that it's actually doing relatively well. So we've seen this with the economy. We've also seen it with civil rights, where we've heard people complaining that, just for example, with Black folks, for example, just saying, hey, things are worse than they've ever been, in America, which strikes some people as saying, like, whoa, you need to kind of look at slavery or Jim Crow or, things like that. But we those kind of things, especially amongst younger people, with lack of perspective or whatever. And so do you see anything beyond kind of just the information ecosystems that why there's this persistent with, in terms of understanding, okay, whatever's happening right now, this tendency to think it's much worse than it actually is. Do you see anything out there? Like a couple of things we mentioned, like I said, the information ecosystem. We also talked about just general pessimism and then looking at everything through negative colored glasses versus, general optimism, looking at it through. But is there anything else that stands out to you about this?
No, I mean, there's a lot going in there, and I think there's like a spectrum of it, right? Because I think I'm laughing because this is like probably the worst time in 2024 in American history to be a Black American. Clearly, you and I have no rights and aren't able to make a show that's on YouTube and all that stuff. No, I mean, but that's the idea of perspective, right? If you read history, American history, it's like this is the best time to be a Black American in the history of America. And so does that mean, and I want to be very clear, right? Does that mean that there's no racism or there's no imbalances and there's no need to continue to kind of fight for justice and equality in general for many minorities in America? Of course, there's always room for improvement. And
it speaks more to what was going on before.
That's what I mean by perspective. Like, the idea of understanding that there were laws like actually holding people back from enjoying citizenship in this country.
Mobs.
And then prior to that, there was actually slavery, right? Which, again, this is crazy because we're laughing now and joking that there are some young Black Americans that think that this is like the worst time ever in this country's history for Black folks. And then we just had a presidential candidate 2 weeks ago in December of 2023 or 3 weeks ago who was asked, what's the cause of this civil war? And she couldn't answer it. She twisted herself into a pretzel talking about, the states' rights and the way the government allows people to freedom. She literally just couldn't say it's about slavery. So both of those to me are interesting dynamics that here we are all these hundreds of years into this country's history. And the way people perceive who live in the same country is dialogue, just perceive the way it is and the history of it are all over the place. So, I think some of it could be, there's some people that believe everything's negative, maybe because of the direction of their own lives. And, instead of looking at stuff in the face and saying, hey, I'm the reason why I'm here and all this, they want to blame it on a lot of things, right? They want to blame it on women's liberation. They want to blame it on racism. They want to blame it on whatever. They're being persecuted for some reason. And then there's others that genuinely may not fall into the negative category, but when exposed to enough in their media and social media ecosystem, they do.
Yeah. I look at it as kind of just a human thing. in the sense that people do tend to just kind of center the history of the world around their own life. And so in the same way you hear like with religion, the people believe that we're living at the end of times. And if you look at throughout history, like people have always kind of believed that, this it's all about to go down during these next few years or these next couple of decades. Like I myself am living through a very important time in history. And so I think that kind of seeing our own selves as living through, now, this is why you may not want too much perspective, is because hearing that the things you're going through, people went through 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, kind of diminishes this feeling. But it's like a feeling of importance. It's like, oh, crime is bad. I'm going to have to make a decision here, or the people that I support, the people that I'm behind are going to have to stand in and save everything and, change the course of history and so forth. So I think it really just is one of those things where we want to see ourselves as being in a pivotal time or being very important to the pivot that's going to go the way make things go the way we want. So I think that it has a lot to do with that. Like, I think we're susceptible to messages like now is the time, we got to do it now, or else, it's gonna, everything's gonna fall apart. Like, so obviously we're susceptible to it. And then there are going to be people, because, profit motive or whatever, that can feed us that information. Because again, if people want to actually know this stuff, right now we live in a time where you can go find it out. It's not difficult. Yeah. It's not like I'm living in a time where it's like, well, okay, so crime rates do they even measure this on a country this large? Is that something can I even acquire that kind of information? Yeah. Okay. Do I have to go to Washington, travel to Washington and go to show up at the Library of Congress and start looking through stuff, or, no, I can find stuff, on government websites, and saying, okay, well, here's what the numbers are saying here and there. So it's not like it's hard to find this information, but I just don't think that's as emotionally satisfying as information that says, and again, particularly if you align that with the idea that if you're optimistic, then optimistic messages are going to resonate with you. Optimistic statistics are going to resonate with you. If you're pessimistic, then pessimistic messages are going to resonate with you. You're going to perceive things more pessimistic. So, I think you overlap that with the idea that it just makes you feel more important if the times now are, just we're at a pivotal time, which again, we've always been in a pivotal time in people's mind. Yeah. And I think that really plays a huge role in it.
Well, that's an interesting point, but as you say that, it makes me think of the statistic that pops up every decade or so. I see it is where they kind of poll people in the moment who are Christian, and who, deep in their faith, and they ask them, do you think the Armageddon will happen in your lifetime? And it's usually a solid 50%.
Yeah.
48, maybe 52 sometime, but it's somewhere around half of people believe, that are Christian.
It's a large number of people that believe that the end of the world is going to happen while they're alive. And that's always been the case.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. For the last 2,000 years, if you ask people every year, they so someone must.
Which is quite pessimistic.
Well, remember, we did this show recently about people, longevity and living forever. Mm-hmm. So if somebody figures that out, then they will be right, because at some point during their existence, the earth will end. But until someone can live forever,
I don't know about that. The earth will become inhospitable before it will end.
But if they live forever, they will still be able to survive that and then see the earth end. But maybe we don't have to play that out.
Yeah, I was going to say that's. But for whatever reason, these disconnects, though, like my question is this: if we can't be trusted to kind of having a decent feel for what's going on around us, we the people, then what does this say, or how does this affect the whole self-governance thing? Or do we just need to turn around and say, look, we just need somebody else to fix it? I need somebody who can just fix this stuff for me, because
it's all really too strong man,
who makes me feel safe and secure. But seriously though.
It'd be cool, like a slash between Santa Claus and Superman. Like where he's kind of fat and looks nice with a beard, and
but seriously though,
then he can shoot lasers out of his eyes.
But seriously though, the question though is like look, if you are a part of a household, you make decisions on your household. Imagine if you persistently thought you were making money You were earning more money than you were spending, and you consistently were spending more money than you were making. Like that kind of a disconnect would fundamentally make you unfit to participate in the decision making at your house, because it's like you can't even get a perception, even though the numbers are there. You can always look at the bank account and see, but you just are constantly walking around saying, "No, we're doing great. We're putting away money every month," and it's like, "No, you're going down each month." Like these kind of disconnects would seemingly affect your ability to make sound decisions.
I have my phone in my hand because you made me realize I'm about to FaceTime my wife because I think you hit something on the head in my personal life. I'm just kidding.
Ooh, give me a second.
That's why I got no money after I keep working. No, but no, I mean, look, you're right. I think this is, like you said earlier, about kind of the messiness of humanity. I mean, this is, I used to think this thought, just one of these stupid thoughts I had in my head, which is it's interesting as humans, we can pass down a lot of things through genetics, hair color, eye color, skin tone, all that kind of stuff, height, health stuff. One thing we can't pass down is memories and experience.
Yeah.
And so I think that does lead us to these cycles, which we've discussed on different discussions. And so, and then thinking of just kind of getting my mind here, thinking of things like, just discussions we've had about around books like Sapiens or The Righteous Mind and things like this, is clearly the human mind is irrational in a lot of ways. And I think
in a lot of ways it doesn't recognize too.
Yeah, exactly. It's because it's about really survival. Yeah. And survival doesn't have to make sense. And, the Sapiens had the good line I remember from we discussed it, which is that, there's no human rights in nature. There's no good and evil.
These are all made up concepts, basically.
Yeah. Like a lion eats a gazelle. The gazelle might have had 2 babies waiting for it to get back. And it's not coming back, and something's going to eat those 2 babies. And that's, we look at that as sad, but as nature.
But just real quick, I'll kick it right back to you. But, I think something in the modern world that's made this more difficult for us to understand is like the advent and the like how computers are spread around, because a lot of times people do look at their brain like a computer, which isn't set up from an evolutionary standpoint, but from a computation or memory standpoint. And so the way that operates, we tend to try to think, okay, that's how our brains operate, but that's just not how our brains work at all. Like we're not taking in information, processing it objectively, and then spitting something back out. Like that's just not how it works. We don't observe something and it sits in memory in exactly the exact same way. And if we kick it back out, it comes back out exactly how we observed it. It all changes in there, and so forth.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And so that's kind of what I'm saying is that, it seems like the emotional side of our way of being is a much stronger pull than our intellectual side for most people, and probably me and you included. And so I think the idea,
which certainly is.
I don't like to think about it, but
you're self-propagandizing yourself now.
Yeah, exactly. I am self-propagandizing. That's the beautiful thing, is that I'll convince myself that it's So, but I mean, that's part of. I mean, as we joke, right? That's part of that we need to be able to be humble enough to recognize we're not perfect, and I think that's difficult for a lot of people. And I think, going back to even something I said earlier about the need to blame something from the outside for what maybe you perceive as your station in life at the moment. Again, we all compare ourselves. So think about it, James, I've been around people like professional athletes that make that kind of money, right? And they think that they're poor because they've signed a $15 million contract and the guy down on the bench, signed a $60 million contract. Mm-hmm. And then you and I would look and say, well, shoot, if I had $15 million just all at once and just live out that interest, I'd be happy. You sitting here, you're going to get that in 3 years and you're unhappy. Yeah. So again, we all delude ourselves and convince ourselves. And I think anyone who's traveled to a third world country, for example, would come back and say, even unless someone's really homeless and on the street, but even in let's say public housing in the United States, many Americans still have it better off than in third world countries, because at least in public housing, you have electricity, running water, and maybe some heat. A lot of countries, people are living in literally, like in Sudan and certain places in the world, they're literally living in shacks in the middle of the desert. So, that's what I think is interesting about all this is that we can delude ourselves. So the American experiment is really, can people become loyal to a system and have an emotional pull that keeps them in fealty with a system? Or to your point, will there always be a person or a set of ideas that can come in and upend, take people's emotions away from looking at that system and saying, no, 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 this system is so messed up that this person has to fix it. And I think, we're clearly looking at everything in our environment today. We're back at that part of the cycle.
There's a constant pull there just because there's a simplicity, and so, I mean, it's not a coincidence that through most human societies, there have been, few people in charge or single person in charge, and so forth, because there's just a simplicity there and it's less to worry about, so to speak. I think for our self-governance system, this is kind of built in. The individual, but you have to make peace with the idea that individual decision making, an individual's ability to look at the facts, observe the facts, and then decide what the best course of action, that is fundamentally compromised. You just have to accept that. The way our system accounts for that is by taking a lot of people. We're taking millions of people, and you're supposed to get to a better result by blending or combining the perceptions of a lot of people. That's going to give us a better chance than if it was one person, they was saying, okay, well, here's my perception, here's what we're going to do. And that's the danger of, when you go down the authoritarian route, and then you have just a single person, because then their misperceptions can determine the course of the whole society. Whereas at least we can balance each other out. Some people are more optimistic, some people are more pessimistic, things like that. And so I think it's built in that sense. This is why you have 12 jurors, or in many cases, depending on the particular jurisdiction, but you have multiple jurors hearing something. It's not because we're concerned that if we only had one, that they wouldn't be able to hear it or whatever. It's just, we're trying to balance out the fact that we know that individuals are flawed in their ability to hear information or see information and then make a decision based on that because of their own biases or perceptions or whatever. And so, but I think what this calls into question also, though, beyond just if humans are always kind of misperceiving things, then, again, I think that's built in, with the use of large numbers. Which, by the way, makes participation very important. If you're sitting out, then you're giving a greater microphone, or you're putting other people's perception as more and more prominent places. We need more people to participate. Even if, people say, oh, well, people aren't educated on the issues. Well, look, most people aren't educated on the issues. I think we see this here now. Most people aren't educated on what's going on. What we need to do is sample a lot of people's perceptions. And then that we get to the best thing. The other thing I'll bring up about this is just kind of the point of free press, which is built into the Constitution, is the idea that truthful information can't be suppressed. And so you have to at least have it out there. But the point of free press isn't to say that only correct information is going to be out there. There's a kind of a belief that people will gravitate towards what's real versus what's not. That may be wrong, but as long as the information's out there, and again, you're relying on multiple perceptions and not a single perception, then that's how the system accounts for that. And it's proven to be at least on par in terms of decision making, if not better and more resilient than having a single person or a small or no group of oligarchs making all the decisions as well. That's led into disaster probably much more on a rate basis than, again, taking the large sample size of perception and then deciding either making decisions or deciding who should be in charge to make decisions, in kind of that self-governance way that we do.
Well, that's because you're not the dictator. I'm sure if you were, you wouldn't have said any of that. But no, I want to follow up. You said a couple interesting things here, and I know you want to jump to part two. But a couple things. One is, because as we're talking, it got me thinking about the basis of this conversation, which is the disconnect. When we started, why is there a disconnect with people's perception about things? Well, we started with crime. Yeah. We could talk about the economy. We could talk about our history, like the Civil War and what caused that. Why is there this disconnect? And so I started thinking as you're talking, is right now, I would say, forget about the Civil War for this conversation, but more of the economy. Even like we mentioned immigration, I totally acknowledge that the amount of people being apprehended at the border right now is much higher than it's been in recent years. But again, just reading that this is the second highest to 1980, still it's the second highest. So that tells me that, okay, like you said,
Well,
we've
since
survived
1980.
this.
So
Yeah,
conceivably, it might have been higher
we've
before
been
that
through
too.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we survived it, right? And so, and then we talk about things like the stock market. The Dow Jones just hit an all-time high, 37,000. Unemployment's just continually staying below 4%. The amount of jobs created, we've created 1 million manufacturing jobs in the last 2 years in this country with bringing the chips back home and all that kind of stuff in manufacturing. So, inflation's come down. Gas is around $3 a gallon. Where it was a year and a half ago, around $4.50 a gallon. So that's the point, is that the information is not that bad at the macro level. That doesn't mean every single American is enjoying themselves right now. But again, like you said, a big society of 300 plus million people, we've never had a time when every single human being in the United States was absolutely happy about everything. So
Nor will we ever have a time, like that.
No, but
like
the
where
reason I
everybody's
bring
happy about
this
it.
up is really that, so in order to disrupt and for certain people, I guess, to gain power and kind of thing, what do you need to do? You got to disrupt this narrative, because the information coming out right now is not that bad about the system. It's not terrible. Like we said, crime's lower, economy's good, all that. So the point is that what we're discussing is basically there's a certain group of people that want to ascend to power at all times. But in order to do so, in this case, they actually just have to create such an air of negativity. Whereas if we look back at maybe the last kind of cultural revolution in the United States, which was the 1960s, that's actually when there were true legal imbalances, like we talked about earlier. It took the 1965 Civil Rights Act to make everybody in this country an equal citizen legally. You still had issues with relates to things like feminism and all that. So at that point, people were marching in the street and all that because certain citizens in this country were being treated much different. Today, the difference in the storming of the Capitol in January 6th and all that, to me, is more of a perception thing. Americans are being treated equally in general, but some Americans I guess, feel that because they got a share, that somehow it's taken away from them. They see it as a zero sum. So they keep being told that there's all this, everything's terrible, to your point about partisanship, whenever my side is not in control. The economy absolutely sucks. Everything's terrible. Crime sucks. And that's where I think we're getting this dissonance because that's what I've told somebody. I go, look, at the end of the day, the parties changed 3 years ago. A country this big doesn't change that much in 3 years.
Yeah.
Like things generally are the system is generally
but
the same.
people's minds and emotions do change that.
Correct. That's what I mean. And it's because of this ecosystems and this negativity. And then the last I'll say is you made a great point here about participation and how that makes the system actually work smoother and better. And that got me thinking about how so many people are threatened by more participation. And I can't help but think, we're in late January of 2024 here, that now there's certain people in politics that started, that have been attacking a performer like Taylor Swift because she's trying to get young ladies registered to vote. Like people are actually intimidated by the idea that more people will participate. And that again makes me think, well, why would you be intimidated by that unless you're trying to control? In order to control people, you got to have a smaller group to control than a larger.
Well, it's easier to control a smaller.
That would be my conspiracy theory if I have it.
Well, that's interesting. But again, because a lot of times the justification you'll hear is, oh, you got all these people that are uninformed or whatever. But I think my point and the point here that we see is that everybody,
according to who? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, everybody to a certain degree is either uninformed or misinformed. And so the larger the sample size, again, maybe this is my background. Like I have a legal background, but I also have an engineering background. And so to me, it's obvious when you start talking terms like sample size that you want a larger sample size than a smaller. And that's what we're talking about here. How do you correct for noise in the system? This is noise, is the fact that people don't know by and large what's going on for countrywide. That's noise. How do you account for that? And that's with a larger sample. And so, I
just want to say that my background's in cooking s'mores on campfires, but somehow I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah. So, but no, it does tend to get to a place where if you do come to it with a level of humility like that, and that's what I think you see lacking in a lot of places, is that people just think that they have all the solutions, and whoever's not doesn't agree with them is just either doesn't know what they're doing, or is evil or whatever. And that happens. Like you'll see that those elements. Our country's set up that those elements can't just dominate by decree. But that's where you get back to the participation part, is that if you don't want those elements, because those elements are always going to be trying to dominate by decree or by just saying, hey, it's ours. And so you have to participate if you want to still have a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And that's what this comes down to. And so I do want to move to the second topic, though. The second topic, which is much lighter, but just interesting. It's something that we've been able to see the behavior of people over centuries, and that deals with tipping. And just kind of we've grown up in a culture, in the United States, we've grown up in a culture where tipping is a part of it. Food service or certain other types of personal service, you tip. And so some people have pointed out the fact that, you're starting to see it in more and more places with the way technology is being used to collect bills, with the tablet screens and so forth. And so just now your tipping is kind of either expected or suggested in more places. But what's your kind of, your view on this particular question that's being raised, as far as more people or more tipping being, or tipping being expected more often, or also just, and the use of tipping in general? Because a lot of people talk about how really what you're doing with tipping is subsidizing the employer to pay the employee less a lot of times. So that's fraught with that as well.
Yeah, it's funny because I just remember having breakfast with a friend like a week ago and leaving a big tip as we were leaving. And I was saying to him, I was laughing. That's like, this is the only industry that we subsidize the employees, the restaurant industry. And I was laughing because,
we subsidize the employer in that sense.
Subsidize the employer, that we're paying their employees, and they get away with highway robbery, not having to pay really the minimum wage or anything. And so, but then I was joking and saying, well, how is it that statistically, don't they say that restaurants are like the highest failure rates? I was thinking, if I could start a business where I didn't have to pay my employees and just rely on my customers. I was thinking about that, James, for today to joke about it. Like, you're an attorney, I run a financial planning firm, and we have staff, and stuff like that. I'm like, imagine if I had my clients just telling them, hey, by the way, you got to pay for my assistant. Yeah. Like, I expect not only you got to pay me fees to cover my costs, but you got to also pay them. It's like, I got to pay for my meal at the restaurant. I know, it wasn't free for you to, get all this produce in and to get the meat in and all that. So I got to pay for that, and I got to pay for your staff. That's interesting. Yeah. So it's and I would say this: I lived overseas for almost 5 years when I was younger, and it was an interesting experience. I think this is a very cultural here in the United States. This idea of tipping. There's a lot of places around the world where it's just not something you do. It's not customary. And we're not used to that, because what I wasn't used to was being told that the waiters and waitresses at the time and bartenders were getting paid like $20 an hour. And that's why you don't tip, in those cultures. So, but I do agree that, there was, and I thought this was nice, that during the pandemic, for example, here, they developed a culture of people trying to go out of their way to support their local business, really tip people that are working as, small businesses. And I think that was cool. But at this point, sometimes when I'm just ordering a cup of coffee and the person didn't do anything, and you're right, they turn the screen and it says, do I want to tip 20%? Sometimes I kind of feel like now, like, damn, everyone's encroaching. This cup of coffee costs $6 as it is. Now I got a tip for that too. Like, when did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, like, you didn't. It's not like my table got cleaned, or like brought me water, and then all this stuff. It's like you just handed something over the counter. Exactly. And no, I mean, I think it first, just to understand, because I don't have an issue with tipping in general. But I think anytime you think about tipping, you have to understand it is a matter of culture. And so, and we'll have a piece in the show notes about tipping, which had a lot of interesting background as far as going back to, hundreds of years ago in Europe, where they believe it originated. One of the things that was interesting to me is the word tip, where it came from. And I think what they cited was that there was in a restaurant, or, it was to ensure with an I, to ensure promptitude. was, what this money was for, which was shortened to tip,
Yeah.
to ensure prostitutes. I had a lot of fun in my mind with that. But like this cultural phenomenon basically is something that is really taken us over, and like that to me is what really stands out the most about it, in the sense that, and again, in the piece we have in the show notes, you'll see one of the things they talk about is how like there's been a lot of hand wringing over tipping since tipping began. Like the whole time, like some people pointed out, like, this is crazy. Why are we doing this? And then in many cultures, like where they did it before, they don't do it now. Like they raise the wages or whatever. But in the United States, it's very persistent, even to the extent that when people have tried to take it out and either pay their workers more, they find that people would still, in certain settings, still tip. And so it's like this losing battle. So to me, I think it says something about our culture that you can't get rid of it, that it's so persistent, in that this is something that for whatever reason, and I would myself, we have a very kind of entrepreneurial and kind of just go get 'em spirit in our culture. And I think that tipping just aligns with that in a way that it's something that it just fits into the American kind of way. And so it's like, that to me is just fascinating about it, that again, like the efforts that have been made, like there was something called the No Tipping Society. There were things called, like, there's all these different things over time. It's like people trying to get rid of it and they can't, and then the spread of it though, which I'll kick it back to you, but I want to talk about the spread of it too, into more and more things. But yeah, just the persistence of it and how it seems to really align with our culture is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, as you say, it makes you realize, tipping is a very American thing for in the way you say it, because if you think about it, I mean, Americans, a lot of people complain about Americans, around the world. And just like we talked in part one, we complain a lot about ourselves. But, I say this in a positive way. Americans have a very generous streak that can come out in certain ways. And I think tipping is one way, like you said, culturally, I could see a lot of Americans just not being comfortable not tipping certain professions because of understanding that they don't get paid well. And I think that's what I mean by that. That shows the kind of generosity of part of the American spirit.
But that's a horse and a carriage type of thing, chicken and egg type of thing, because it's like, well, that putting the cart before the horse, type of thing, or chicken and egg kind of thing, because they don't get paid well because they are tipped. Well, it's not like they don't get paid well inherently, at least in terms of service. That's what I was going to
say, is that it's very American. That's what I mean, because in one way, you've got the generosity in response to understanding that these people in general aren't being paid the same as the rest of us. And number two, the American part of it too is the strength of the restaurant lobby, right? Like the ability for an industry to lobby the government to say, this whole class of citizens that works in this type of industry, we need you to look the other way and not allow them to meet the minimum wage standards and all that you would require for the rest of society.
Congress passed a law that gave them a different minimum wage for those type of places.
That's what I mean. This is very American. It's because in one way, you've got the generosity side of Americans kind of looking at this group and saying, okay, let's pile together and help them. And on the other side, you've got the very industry
exploitative
favorite size of, and that's what I mean by like so I joke about, like, when I went to Europe and ate the food and realized, man, the European Union actually doesn't allow McDonald's to put the same thing that our government allows us. I got to go overseas to another continent to eat food from an American corporation that's way better than here in America, and it's because the way our government allows companies to lobby it. And so that's what I mean by. That's why the rest of the world, it's an interesting American dynamic, is the rest of the world does not allow American restaurants to go in there and open up restaurants and not pay properly, right? Yeah. Like they force American restaurants like Morton's and these others to pay, if you go to Australia or Canada, Ruth's Chris got paying people, their minimum wage.
Yeah, the servers don't just get less money and have to rely on tips.
Yeah. So for some reason, our restaurant and entertainment type of businesses are allowed to, pay under, lower than other industries. And that's what I mean by just in a positive way. I say that's what makes America, America. It's
good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's the thing, though. Even in states, for example, where they've taken that away and they've made, like, I think California and Nevada are two states where they've made it so that you can't pay the servers or, tipped employees less. They found that it's not like that makes the tipping go away. Like it's so ingrained in the culture. And I think some of that is just kind of what I was saying as far as like the enterprising spirit in that like kind of we want to reward in America like the person who grinds extra hard, or we want to see that person at least by and large. And so, but that's where the expansion of it has, like it's really, I think now again, understanding that people have complained about tipping, certain people have complained about tipping the whole time, but I think that there's more people that have kind of given it the I don't know, you want to call it the side eye or whatever, where you're seeing in industries where it's just becoming integrated into the payment systems. And so, or in all industries, it's becoming integrated into the payment systems. And therefore, it's starting to expand like, oh, okay, yeah, I go get my dry cleaning. And it's like, okay, do I want to tip? And it's like, well, hold on. All you did was hand me the stuff. Like I'm paying for the actual dry cleaning and the hanging and all that stuff. But the person who's operating the cash register, am I supposed to tip them as well? Or just any types of things, like you're seeing this expand out more, but just because of the way it's built into the payment systems. And so like that to me is, I wonder if that pushes to a tipping point where Americans eventually just go the way the rest of the world, most of the rest of the world is.
I wonder if that pun was intended.
What's that?
You missed yourself. You said it's being pushed into the tipping point.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't intended. I'm glad you caught it. But at a certain point, I mean, like again, people have tried before to go take the approach that we've seen in other countries, or people take in other countries as far as to try to get rid of tipping and just make the employers pay the employees, and the customer can pay for it, and then they can leave. It hasn't worked here. It's worked in other places. So I wonder if, as it expands out to more and more things that are less associated with, I'm seeing you do a bunch of hard work for me, if it'll get to a point to where they're like, you know what? Like, yes, we'll just, our culture will go a different way, or if it won't, or if it's just so ingrained in certain parts of the American culture that it won't happen. I wonder about that.
Hey, we'll see if there's a revolt against tipping non-restaurant workers.
But see, there's been that, where there's been, and it's always failed, so you would think, but the way kind of we think of the world is that when something gets pushed too far, then eventually there's a reaction. And so that's kind of what I wonder is if it's going to get pushed too far, or if this is something that is just kind of just the way it is. Last question before we get out of here is how, just personally, how do you decide what to tip? Like, whether it be delivery or whether it be like, in restaurant service, do you do it solely based on the size of the meal, or as a percentage, or do you, if it's a harder kind of thing, if it's raining outside and it's a delivery, or if it's 3-course meal at a restaurant versus a buffet style, or something like that, dude? What do you do as far as the scale?
I think I default to around that 15 to 20% range, depending on if I wasn't that impressed and all that, it'll be on the lower end of that, and if I'm more impressed, it'll be on the higher end. It's funny. I was at a friend's birthday brunch on a Sunday, and it was at a nicer restaurant. So it was one of these. We had a big party of 20. So the waiter broke it up with the couple. So me and my wife, our bill was shared, and so it had he told us that the waiter that it had an automatic 18% gratuity. But I actually liked this guy. He did a great job, I thought, and very proactive, always checking on us. So I actually rounded it up and gave him like an extra 2-3%. But that's not what I do every time. So yeah, there is. I'll tip out of respect at all times. I can probably count on one hand, and definitely probably only once or twice really, where I either didn't tip someone or gave them on purpose a very low one, and maybe wrote up. I can remember one time, right?
Oh, you're a receipt writer?
Yeah, no, it's only happened twice, but it was like terrible service. And I just wrote like, I can't even tip you for this. But normally, even if I'm not that impressed, like I said, I will give some sort of tip on the lower end, just out of respect for the fact this is how they earn their living. But yeah, if I'm very happy, or I feel like somewhere, and sometimes to your point, a delivery driver coming in the middle of a Florida friggin' tropical storm, I might up that tip a bit, say, hey, I see that you hustle. And you're right, that's different from when I'm buying something that is already, let's say, prepaid. Like I'm joking in my head thinking about like if I went to Best Buy, to your point about going to a cash register, and I bought, let's say I bought a terabyte external hard drive, and I'm just sitting there, and the guy's got a tip jar, I'd probably be like, dude, what are you doing?
Like you can go to Best Buy and get a flat screen TV, and they're like 10% tip. Like, whoa.
So,
y'all better. But nah, for me, I'm actually I'm in the group of people that just kind of almost do it. I like reflexively in the traditional circumstances. Like it has to be something different. If it's a carry out or something, it'll be $1 or $2. You know, just kind of like okay, yeah. But if it's a delivery, if it's a like restaurant type of thing, I would like if it's bad service, I'm at 15. And then if it's good service, I'm at 20. Like it's something I just don't think about that much. I'm a person, I'll just tip it all the time. I don't write anything, it's just kind of like just what it is. Like from a cultural standpoint, it's just what you do in my mind, like, so it's in the range. It's a very tight range. I see it's pushing now. Sometimes people are like, oh no, it's 22 to 18%. Like, whoa. And, we'll see how the culture evolves. But yeah, I mean, I definitely look at it as something that, because I understand the economics, particularly in places where either it's a delivery driver who's paid very little and doing a lot, or a server who's paid very little. Like I'm just trying to keep that system flowing. But I do feel it's messed up that the businesses, are kind of making us subsidize that. But I don't want to make the workers pay for that. Like it's just like, all right.
If a delivery driver shows up at your house later who's my height, somewhat my complexion, with similar voice, with a disguise on, it's not me. But you should tip him very well.
With a big handlebar mustache.
I have the Humpty dance nose. Remember
there you go. There you go.
That nose with the glasses.
Yeah. So well, no, and the only thing I'll
just tip him real well. He's a nice guy. He needs
exactly. Yeah, he can regale me with a few anecdotes, and I'll give him a bigger tip. So
I get the feeling he won't hang around long. He'll just take his money and leave. You might figure out who he is.
We appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Until next time, I'm James Keys.
I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
All right, we'll talk to you next time.